It began with a sealed box. No press, no royal aides, just King Charles, a private chamber, and one decision that would shake the monarchy to its roots. Inside that box, Diana's crown. And by the end of that quiet meeting, it no longer belonged to memory, it belonged to Princess Anne. But why now? And why her? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The atmosphere inside that room was heavy, laced with unspoken words and decades of unhealed wounds. Charles had summoned Anne without warning. Not even her closest aides had prior knowledge. When she entered, she found the king already seated, the box resting solemnly on the table before him. No formal greetings, no rehearsed dialogue. Charles simply looked at her and said, "It's time we corrected what was never made right." Anne, the ever-disciplined royal, held her composure. But when he placed his hand on the box and slowly opened the lid, even she couldn't conceal the flicker of disbelief that swept across her face. There it was, Diana's crown, gleaming as if untouched by time, a symbol of beauty, pain, and lost legacy. Charles spoke of unfinished duty, of how history often chooses the wrong moment to course correct, and how sometimes those with the least desire for power are the most deserving of it. He told Anne that this wasn't about lineage or tradition, it was about clarity. Diana was not just a princess, he said, she was a force. And her memory shouldn't be confined to glass boxes and exhibitions. It needs a guardian, someone beyond ambition, someone unshakable. The words were deliberate, almost rehearsed, as if he'd been preparing them for years. Anne didn't speak for a long time. One royal aide later confessed her face was frozen in shock. She didn't know whether to accept it as a command or a confession. And in that moment, the line between duty and inheritance blurred. The moment the crown left the box and touched Anne's hands, something shifted inside the monarchy. Whispers began circulating almost instantly. It wasn't just a handover, it was a statement, a redirection, and perhaps a quiet dethroning of expectation. The corridors of Buckingham Palace, usually hushed and restrained, buzzed with questions no one was brave enough to ask out loud. Why Anne? Why now? Was this a snub to William and Catherine? Was it Charles's way of rewriting a legacy that had long haunted him? Senior courtiers exchanged glances, staff made hurried phone calls, and insiders noted that the king had gone unusually silent after the meeting. One royal insider put it bluntly, it was never supposed to be Anne. It was meant for the future queen. And while Anne was handed a legacy draped in diamonds, William was left in the dark until a single phone call shattered his composure. The Prince of Wales had waited years to see Diana's crown return to its rightful place beside his wife. But that hope vanished in seconds when Charles told him the truth. It wasn't anger that came first, it was grief. And behind palace doors, William broke down in a way few had ever seen. The call came unexpectedly. William was in the middle of a scheduled engagement briefing his team on an upcoming Commonwealth initiative when his phone rang with the King's private seal. What followed was a conversation laced with hesitation and cold finality. Charles, in his restrained tone, informed his son that Diana's crown had been passed to Anne. There were no explanations, no preambles, no chance to object, just a declaration, quiet but definitive. Observers say William stood frozen for a moment, then simply said, "She was my mother," before walking out mid-sentence, leaving his aides in stunned silence. It wasn't just the words, it was the breaking point they marked. Because in that moment, it became clear, William had not just lost a relic of his past, he had lost a piece of healing he'd long believed was still within reach. Back inside Kensington, Catherine was told. And yet, according to one insider, she said nothing at all. Not to the staff, not to William, not even in private. Her silence was louder than any scream. Perhaps she knew the weight of what had just happened, that this wasn't merely about a crown, it was about memory, lineage, pain, and betrayal wrapped in velvet. Those close to the couple said William became almost unreachable in the hours that followed. He didn't shout, he didn't blame, he simply withdrew, carrying a sorrow too old and too fresh to articulate. What hurt more wasn't that he wasn't chosen, it was that he hadn't even been consulted, not as heir, not as son, and not as Diana's child. Echoes of Diana's final public moments resurfaced footage, the way the crown sat above her brow during those last few months when she was still navigating the minefield of royal duty. To William, that crown wasn't a symbol of monarchy. It was a symbol of his mother's resilience. And in his mind, it was always meant to return through Catherine to complete the story Diana never got to finish. But now, with one royal act, that closure was erased, replaced with a narrative he had no control over. As the news began to trickle through the palace halls, whispers turned into theories. Was this Charles settling an old score? Or was it his way of detaching the crown from emotion, from legacy, from Diana herself? Some suggested it was strategic, a deliberate move to pivot the monarchy away from past mythologies. Others, more quietly, wondered if it was punishment. A reshaping of destiny, not for the good of the crown, but for the ego of the king. But while William mourned what was lost, Anne struggled to understand why she was chosen at all. The monarchy doesn't make spontaneous decisions, especially not with sacred heirlooms. Behind this controversial handover was a pact made decades ago, one known only to three people: Charles, Anne, and the Queen. It began long before Diana's crown was ever removed from its velvet case. In the years after Diana's death, Queen Elizabeth II found herself watching her family spiral through chaos, scandal, and reinvention. One evening, quiet, unrecorded, she is said to have summoned Charles for a private conversation. Not about the throne, not about Camilla, but about legacy. Her words, preserved only in memory, carried a weight Charles couldn't forget. The future must hold strength, not sentiment, duty over desire, and only one among you has ever held that line without wavering: your sister. At the time, it was a cryptic remark, but it would become the cornerstone of a decision that, decades later, would bring the palace to its knees. What many forget is that Anne, the Princess Royal, once turned down nearly every ceremonial crown offered to her. She had no desire for glittering thrones or symbolic jewels. She built her reputation on grit, not glamour, which is why this moment, this acceptance of Diana's crown, felt so out of character. And that's what made it so unsettling. Royal insiders revealed whispers of a sealed letter penned by the Queen herself and handed to Charles during her final months, a letter that named Anne, not Catherine, as the true steward of Diana's unfinished legacy. Not because she was the natural heir, but because she was the only one trusted to protect it without turning it into a spectacle. But not everyone agreed with this direction. According to one senior courtier, Camilla was deeply unsettled by proposal. She feared, not without reason, that elevating Anne with such a loaded symbol would reignite the public's obsession with Diana, reopening wounds, inviting comparisons, and overshadowing everything Camilla had worked to build. Her objections were firm, but Charles overruled her, because in his eyes the Queen's word was final, and Charles, having lived under his mother's shadow for over 70 years, wasn't about to challenge her final wishes. The advisory council, meanwhile, was split. Some warned that the move would destabilize the monarchy's image. Others believed it was a masterstroke, an unexpected pivot that placed stability before sentimentality. But there was one fear they all shared, spoken behind closed doors: this could spark a succession war in slow motion. Not a war of swords or declarations, but of influence, of symbolism, of public loyalty. Because once Diana's crown passed to Anne, the question wasn't just why her, it was what comes next. And Anne herself? She didn't ask for the crown. She didn't celebrate. She simply accepted it with the same stoicism that has defined her royal life. But behind that composure, those closest to her noticed the weight settling on her shoulders. This wasn't a coronation, it was a burden, a legacy handed down not through birthright but through unspoken loyalty, one that had to be honored, even if it meant stepping into the eye of a storm she never wanted. And as Anne wrestled with a legacy she never asked for, the public began demanding answers of their own. When photos of Anne with a crown surfaced, the internet exploded. For many, it wasn't just about royalty, it was about memory, betrayal, and a ghost that never left. Diana's legacy wasn't buried, it was bleeding. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Princess Anne stepping out of a royal vehicle during a closed-door tribute, and on her head Diana's crown. It wasn't announced, it wasn't staged, but someone, somewhere, captured it. Within hours, it was everywhere. Not just a trending topic, but a cultural earthquake. Hashtag Diana's crown surged to the top of every platform. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it unforgivable theft. A new hashtag followed, hashtag Not My Princess, echoing the fury of those who believed Diana's memory had been hijacked in plain sight. This wasn't about protocol anymore. This was personal. To millions who grew up with Diana as their symbol of compassion and rebellion against a rigid system, it felt like the institution had not only ignored her pain, but repurposed her glory. Whoa. Tea followed wasn't silence, it was a haunting echo. Tribute videos resurfaced of Diana's final BBC interview, her voice trembling, her words clear. There were 3 of us in this marriage. Now viewers added a new caption, and still she wears the crown. Emotional montages flooded timelines. People weren't just angry, they were grieving all over again. It wasn't about Anne, it wasn't even about Charles, it was about the unfinished business that Diana left behind, and the fear that history had just been rewritten without consent. Generational divide became impossible to ignore. Older royalists defended the move, citing Anne's loyalty, her discipline, her lifelong service. But younger voices, those raised on stories of Diana's defiance, her kindness, her wounds, saw only one thing: the crown stripped from its rightful heir. The emotional backlash reached such a pitch that for the first time in months, Buckingham Palace was forced to issue a public statement. But the words were cold, cautious, vague. They acknowledged the symbolic nature of legacy items and affirmed respect for historical continuity. A line so calculated it felt like a dismissal. Not a bridge, not an apology. And behind those press briefings, something else was happening. Tabloid headlines grew darker, more accusatory. Has the monarchy rewritten her legacy? Where does Catherine stand? Is Anne the new matriarch? The shift wasn't just cultural, it was constitutional. Because when the people question symbols, they begin to question power. Diana's crown had never just been jewelry, it had been the final line between public mourning and royal detachment, and now that line had been crossed. But even as the world debated, a new storm brewed inside Kensington Palace, and Catherine found herself at its eye. She didn't cry, she didn't shout, but those closest to the Princess of Wales say they had never seen her this quiet or this determined. What she did next stunned even the most senior courtiers. Catherine, who had long mastered the art of royal composure, vanished from the public eye without a single explanation. 2 public appearances, both highly anticipated, were quietly scrubbed from the calendar. No illness, no schedule conflict, just absence. But within palace walls, the silence was anything but passive. "She's grieving something she never got to hold," whispered a close aide. And though no official statement would confirm it, everyone knew what she meant. The crown that once adorned Diana's head wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a torch. And Catherine had long been seen as its rightful bearer. What followed was not protest, but precision. Catherine reportedly began holding private, off-the-record conversations with Princess Beatrice and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. These weren't social calls. Sources described the atmosphere as measured but deeply emotional, hinting that Catherine was building quiet alliances not to challenge the crown, but to protect something much deeper: legacy. She stopped wearing Diana's jewelry entirely. Not a single brooch, earring, or sapphire pendant would appear on her for the foreseeable future. And with that symbolic refusal, she sent a message that required no words at all. "I will not perform grief while it is being rewritten." Inside the palace, emotional tensions reportedly escalated between Catherine and Queen Camilla. The two had often managed a strained coexistence, but now that strained civility was cracking. Rumours swirled of a closed-door confrontation in which Camilla is said to have warned, "This is not about Diana anymore." To which Catherine, without raising her voice, allegedly replied, "It always was." Staff began noticing the shifts. Schedules changed without warning. Requests for joint appearances between Catherine and Camilla were quietly denied. For the first time in years, the monarchy's female front was no longer unified, and the world could feel it. And yet, outside the palace gates, something extraordinary happened. Social media, already a battlefield of royal sentiment, began shifting in Catherine's favor. Hashtags like #AirByGrace and #Diana's Spirit trended for days. People didn't just see a princess in mourning, they saw a woman standing in quiet protest against a decision that felt both personal and political. Comment threads filled with comparisons, not between crowns but between characters. "She doesn't need the crown," one post read, "because she already carries the weight Diana once bore." Irene never gave a speech. She didn't need to. Her absence, her silence, her subtle refusals, they echoed louder than any public statement ever could. Because sometimes, the most powerful kind of defiance is the kind that doesn't seek to be seen, it simply refuses to disappear. Anne, while Catherine held her silence, the crown's decision-makers began to fracture behind the scenes. She wasn't just the queen consort, she was the gatekeeper of royal perception. And Camilla was furious. Anne had been elevated, Catherine sidelined, and Charles? He was alone in a palace of whispers. Camilla didn't wait long to voice her displeasure. Behind closed doors, before a select circle of senior advisors, she reportedly questioned the very foundation of Charles's decision. The question wasn't about symbolism or family legacy, it was about survival. "Do you want to repeat history? Or survive it?" she is said to have asked. A direct reference to the chaos Diana once brought into the royal ecosystem. But this time, the threat wasn't from outside, it was internal. Anne's sudden prominence had thrown the entire hierarchy into imbalance, and Camilla, always attuned to the optics of monarchy, feared the worst. Charles, once known for his deliberation and calculation, now appeared uncertain. Meetings were quietly cancelled, events postponed without explanation. Rumors of declining health began to circulate, unconfirmed but persistent. One source whispered that Charles confided in an aide, "They'll never forgive me for this." Whether he meant the public, his son, or the institution itself, no one was sure. But the weight of regret was visible in every corner of the palace. The fallout wasn't just internal. William, still raw from the emotional blow, reportedly declined a direct call from Charles. No explanation, no return message, just silence. A silence louder than any words could have been. And while Camilla pushed for damage control, Charles withdrew further into himself, leaving others to manage the storm he had created. Within the palace, a deep chill began to settle in. Staff described the atmosphere as a frozen house. Conversations were cautious, smiles were forced. The usual machinery of monarchy. The illusion of unity and unshakable order was cracking. For decades, the family had mastered the art of containing drama behind closed doors. But now, with Diana's shadow looming larger than ever, the cracks were no longer containable. Camilla knew what was coming: the public backlash, the press frenzy, the questions, and worst of all, the comparisons. No matter how far they tried to move beyond Diana, her crown had dragged the family back into her orbit. And Charles? He had chosen emotion over protocol, legacy over peace, Anne over consensus. Camilla, once the ultimate survivor in a world that had rejected her, now faced her own reckoning. Because no matter how many tiaras she wore or how many titles she carried, in this moment, she was not the center of the storm. She was merely trapped inside it, watching the monarchy unravel from within. And just as tensions reached a boiling point inside the palace, Anne made a move that stunned the world. In an unexpected royal statement, Princess Anne addressed the world not with grandeur, but with humility. And what she revealed turned everything upside down. It wasn't scheduled, it wasn't rehearsed, but it was felt. The royal press corps was stunned into silence as Anne, known for her discipline and restraint, stepped forward to speak not as a princess, but as a sister, an aunt, and a custodian of a legacy no one could fully understand. Her words were not defensive, they were disarming. "This crown was never mine to keep," she began. And with that, the winds inside the monarchy shifted. Anne clarified what no one in the palace had dared to say. The crown, Diana's crown, was not about inheritance or hierarchy. It was about memory. A symbol of memory, not ownership, she said. Her voice steady, her message unmistakable. She acknowledged the pain it had stirred, especially in William and Catherine, whose silence had only fueled the firestorm of speculation. But in a rare moment of emotional transparency, Anne said she had felt compelled to carry it not for herself but to protect it, temporarily, until its meaning could be restored, not rewritten. She called herself a guardian, not a successor. And that single phrase undid weeks of tension. Royal watchers called it the most redemptive moment in modern palace history. Tabloids that had screamed betrayal just days earlier now hailed Anne's statement as a royal reset. Her empathy for William, spoken without reservation, broke the ice that had paralyzed public opinion. And for Catherine, Anne's words were a salve of public acknowledgement that she had never been sidelined in spirit, only in circumstance. Inside the palace, staff reported an immediate change in tone. The rigid silences gave way to cautious conversations. The bitterness that had overtaken Charles's household seemed to ease, if only slightly. The monarchy, long accused of being tone-deaf, had finally heard the public and responded with rare sincerity. Outside Buckingham Palace, people gathered not to protest, but to reflect. Messages of support poured in from across the globe. Social media turned from outrage to admiration. #Crown Guardian began trending worldwide, not as a critique, but as a tribute to Anne's sense of duty. For once, the royal family wasn't being compared to the past, they were being praised for evolving. And yet, one voice remained notably absent. William had not responded. No official word from Kensington. No public gesture, just silence. The kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that begged resolution. Because no matter how noble Anne's words were, the future of the crown still rested on the shoulders of Diana's son. But one person still remained silent, and his decision could determine the monarchy's future. For weeks he watched, listened, and grieved. But now, the Prince of Wales faced a choice that would echo through generations: accept the crown's reshaping, or rise to reclaim its future. The moment didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived with purpose. William, unseen and unheard since the emotional fallout, stepped into the public eye once more by Catherine's side. There were no statements beforehand, no teasers to the press, just presence. Silent, resolute, unmistakable. And in that presence was an answer louder than any decree. A chariot. Event previously postponed due to scheduling conflicts. William walked to the podium with a steadiness that betrayed none of the chaos behind palace walls. But when he spoke, the crowd fell still. Legacy, he said, is not just what we inherit, but what we protect. A single line veiled in diplomacy but charged with meaning. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even defiance. It was direction. Royal observers immediately noticed the cufflinks, small, silver, and unmistakably Diana's. A tribute, yes, but also a signal. William wasn't just mourning the past anymore. He was defending it. He wasn't there to revisit grief. He was there to define what would come after it. What followed wasn't a royal press release, it was a quiet surge of movement behind palace gates. Insiders revealed that private meetings had resumed, not just between William and his father, but among the entire senior circle. Tensions hadn't vanished, but something had changed. Anne's humility, Catherine's restraint, and William's return had forced a recalibration. And quietly, away from the glare of cameras, a reconciliation began to take root. But one gesture sealed it. William took his children George, Charlotte, and Louis to Diana's grave. There were no press photographers, no palace escorts, just family, just remembrance. It was not just a son returning to his mother. It was a father showing his children the foundation of the crown they may one day wear. Witnesses described the atmosphere as reverent, almost sacred. William didn't need headlines. He had legacy in his hands. And in another quiet development, advisors suggested that Diana's crown, once at the center of a storm, would soon be enshrined not in competition, but in unity. A joint memorial, honoring not just Diana's title, but her truth. Not a crown passed down with rivalry, but a symbol preserved in harmony. What William chose in that moment wasn't revenge. It wasn't silence either. It was something harder, restraint with purpose. He chose to lead not through confrontation, but through clarity, to mourn and move forward in the same breath. And as a crown once buried in grief finds a new future, one truth remains unshaken. The woman they tried to silence became the voice they could never forget. And now, decades later, the crown she wore doesn't just sit in a box or atop a head, it lives in the hearts of those still fighting to protect her truth. Diana's story was never linear. It was layered, unruly, and inconvenient to those who tried to control it. But now, the nation wasn't whispering her name in nostalgia, it was saying it aloud with conviction. What had been treated as private grief became public reckoning. Schools discussed her advocacy. Parliamentarians invoked her name in debates about compassion and reform. And royal historians, once cautious, began reframing her legacy not as rebellion but prophecy. In a rare joint statement, William and Princess Anne announced something unexpected: the creation of the Diana Custodianship Trust, a royal foundation aimed at supporting women, mental health awareness, and humanitarian education. But this wasn't just about funding. It was about institutional memory. The monarchy was no longer shielding itself from her shadow, it was stepping into it. At the heart of the Trust's initiatives stood one unmistakable emblem: the crown once worn by Diana, now repurposed as a centerpiece in a groundbreaking rotating exhibition titled The Uncrowned Power, Women of the Monarchy. The display didn't just feature Diana's artifacts. It placed them beside those of Queen Elizabeth I, Victoria, Anne, and even modern consorts who challenged tradition from within. This wasn't just a tribute, it was a reckoning with history. And this time, it was framed in Diana's language: vulnerability, courage, and refusal to be edited. Catherine, Princess of Wales, returned to the public eye not as someone recovering, but as someone reborn. Her silence, once mistaken for retreat, became the most powerful statement of all. She entered events with quiet strength, wearing none of Diana's jewels but carrying all of her conviction. She spoke less but meant more, and every gesture, every smile, every pause was laced with something deeper: understanding, resilience, and unspoken alignment with the woman whose legacy she now carried forward, not through adornment, but action. Even Charles, long criticized for indecision, began to be viewed in a new light. While many questioned his methods, others saw in his controversial choice the very friction that forced the family to evolve. Perhaps he hadn't ignited Diana's return, but his silence, his struggle, had unwillingly made space for it. And so, in a kingdom once divided by grief, Diana's presence was no longer confined to documentaries, candles, or tabloid memories. She had returned not in body, but in meaning. The monarchy hadn't replaced her. It had, at long last, acknowledged her. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.